Welcome to the Business Growth Spotlight, where we shine the light and talk with business leaders from all over the world to share their insights and expertise so we can all grow together. I'm your host, Heidi, and I'm the co-founder of the Spotlight to Scale Accelerator, where we drive revenue for companies by making sure they are seen as the authority and go-to expert in their field versus just another product or service. And I'm really thrilled to be bringing you my guest. She is a powerhouse. She has started multiple companies, so we're going to dive into that. And her name is Christine Hernandez with the Impact Initiative. So welcome, Christine, to the show. And I thank you so much for your time today.
Yeah, I'm excited to hop in and get to business. This is exactly up my alley.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's dive in. So can we start out with you sharing a little bit, tell us who you are, what you do, and a little bit about your background and journey.
Yeah, so I would say I am a serial CEO. I find myself in that seat whether I want to or not a couple of times in my career. But I was someone who actually started in the education system. That's actually where my background started. And then I realized that I couldn't like actually change that like I wanted to. And so I've actually went through all the stages. I've worked with kids into teens, and then I found myself pretty early starting a business. I started my first business when I was 19. And so I just see that there is a gap in our learning system. I was actually really not great at learning. And I think that we just have forgotten how to learn things. And so now I work with companies and teams because I've realized through my career of having a couple service-based businesses, I had a product-based business in my early 20s as well that went international and grew very fast. I realized really quickly that we spend the most of our time in our entire lives at work. And so what opportunity is better than actually catching people where they spend the most of their time and the majority of their time. And so I have a love for teaching people. And I just believe that everyone should love their job. Everyone should be excited. Not that we're always excited because business brings a lot of challenges, but I just believe that everyone should wake up and have an opportunity to just enjoy what they do because they spend a lot of time there. We see our coworkers sometimes more than we see our kids and our spouses. So I take that really seriously. And so that's what we do at Impact Initiative is we design and help businesses grow environments that their employees want to be there and they're excited about what they're doing, whether it's carpet cleaning. I've had a carpet cleaning company. And so that's probably the least sexy job in the world, but we can make it really engaging and we can value people at work. So that is a little bit about who I am and what we do at Impact Initiative.
Thank you for sharing all that. And carpet cleaning may not sound sexy to many, but it sounds sexy to me right now because I've got a carpet in my bedroom under my bed that needs a cleaning. So I am looking for a
Yeah.
carpet cleaner. So I love that you shared that. And as well as my couches, as you can see, if you're watching this on YouTube, if you're watching the video version of our podcast, I have a dog that walks through and I had multiple animals. So I am no stranger to having to get carpets and furniture cleaned on a regular basis. So thank you for sharing all of that. And we are always learning and it's never ending battle. Like we think when we're younger, oh, I can't wait to get out of school. I won't have to do this all the time. But we don't realize, and I tell my kids, this is not going to end. This is your job right now to go to school and do the best you can. And I'm not expecting all A's, but I'm not allowing zeros either. You get to show up and do the work. And if you need the support, we'll get it for you. But it's really interesting that you shared that you weren't the greatest learner, in your opinion. And we're always harder on ourselves than anybody else can be on us. But my children are so different. My son learns completely different way than my daughter does. And he's 14 and she's 15. So it really hit close to home when you shared that, because it's a good reminder. We have business owners that are listening, but at the same time, we're parents. Many of us that are listening right now are parents. And it's a good reminder that you shared that, for me, especially, to go, okay, you know what? Let me give my kids a little grace here. They don't learn the same way. And just because the one way of they're being taught doesn't mean it's effective for them. So yeah, I think that's important. Is there one thing that truly inspired you to establish Impact Initiative, or is that basically what you just shared with us?
Yeah, I think it's just honestly as a young leader that started my first company and before my 20s, even, I really screwed things up. And I was not a good leader at the beginning. And I got a lot of really harsh feedback and I had high turnover And I swung on the pendulum from really direct to too lenient. And I had to learn the hard way in a lot of ways. And so I would say, like, the core common thread of all of my companies or anything that I teach is I probably struggled with it. And I just want to flatten the learning curve. I think that there's just an opportunity to teach things. I'm huge into mentorship. I think the greatest thing that we're missing in the marketplace is people's knowledge and wisdom. We talk a lot about the wealth transfer, but we don't talk a lot about a wisdom transfer. And we stop learning and we have all these teachers at the beginning of our life, and then all of a sudden we just don't have anyone who's mentoring us or teaching us, unless you go and hire a coach, or you have a really great boss or something like that. So I was not a great boss. I really sucked for a lot of years, and it was to my bottom line's detriment in so many ways. And I think if I could have figured that out sooner, I probably would have been a lot more successful. And ultimately, I would have liked my life a little bit more, and my employees would have probably not quit and probably liked their lives a little bit more. So, honestly, that just being a really crappy leader is where the Impact Initiative came, and just seeing a lot of people hurt by leadership. Like, it just damages us in a really big way. And so, I want to be a leader that leaves a positive impact, not a negative one, because I don't believe there's a pause on impact. I think we are always going to make an impact, regardless of if we're intentional about it or not. And so, are you making a negative impact or a positive impact? And based on all the negative impact that I made in my early 20s and like even my earlier 30s, I definitely could give back to the world in a positive way. So, that's where it came from.
Yeah, I think it's great what you shared. And I love that your vulnerability and openness. And you're like, yeah, I was a crappy leader, like flat out. Like this, what I love about you, and I'm so grateful to have you on today because you're showing a different side of this journey of building and scaling a business. This isn't your first business. And you never gave up. Like you own it. Listen, I started at 19 and that's commendable. That's amazing and incredible. And you were like, and you got harsh feedback. A lot of people would run under a rock and hide and never come back out again. And you didn't do that. You kept going. And I love that perseverance and that fire and that commitment to, you know what, I'm willing to take the feedback and help myself get better in the process so I don't repeat those same mistakes. And now, because you've kept going, you now have a business. And I think a lot of people out there, they start a business and think, oh, I'm going to crush it. I'm going to be successful. And then the first hurdle that they come across in the first quote unquote failure, that's they shut their doors, or they fold in. So thank you for sharing that because I think that's a powerful takeaway inside of this. And I know we're going to have so many more takeaways because we're just getting started. Can you share with us the mission of Impact Initiative? Your mission, your vision for what you want to create or what you're creating with Impact Initiative?
Yeah. And I shared our vision earlier. It's that every person would, whether you're a top down leader, you're C-suite exec, or you're on the bottom and an entry level position, you would have a place that you feel called to go to work and you feel excited and you feel embraced. So we want to create environments. We see like a world where everyone has a space to call home and to feel like they can actually make an impact regardless of how early on they are or not. And then our mission is to equip and empower leaders to be better and to know that they have an impact that matters so that they can do the work that they're called to do and lead others in the same. So that is our vision and mission. And honestly, it's a lot about, I've been to so many conferences and I've done all the things and I've invested like, we're like talking about this, my husband and I, he also owns a business. And I think we've probably invested close to $1 million. I'm not even exaggerating in conferences and coaching and leadership development. And obviously I believe in it. But with most of the experiences we had, it was like, okay, great. These are awesome concepts. Even with getting like an MBA or something, like these are really awesome things and tools. But what the heck do I do on Monday when I have to go and face my employee that I have to let go or I have to
Mm.
give a bad review to? What do I do on Monday? And so I like to look at it as we're a little bit of a fractional people partner. And I think everyone needs that. I want to be the person that my clients call when they're like, I have to fire this person or I have to give them hard feedback or I get to celebrate with my team. How do I do it? Because I just didn't have anyone to call. I know I need to do this thing, how do I do it well? And what the heck does it look like? And so it really is about that tactical. It's not about concepts. I think there's a lot of value in teaching about concepts, but if we don't know how to go do the thing, then it does, or do it well, it's not going to get integrated very well. And so I just, part of our mission is really the tactical stuff, like the stuff that's really not sexy that you just have to do because you're a leader and you have people staring back at you all of the time.
Mm. Yeah, what I'm hearing is communication.
Totally. It's a huge
Yeah,
part of it.
let's talk about that. So, how can business leaders improve their communication to foster trust and engagement with their teams? And also, like you shared, one of your concerns was, okay, I got to handle this. We can talk about that too when those difficult conversations. But let's start with the communication on fostering trust and engagement, and then we'll move into that, like how to handle those difficult conversations.
Yeah, I think for me, understanding how to do transparency in I try not to use the word authentic because I feel like it's a little bit overused and people are like authentic. And I don't really know that it always serves us to just go by what's authentic. But I think that in a real way, I had to figure out what transparency looked like to me and how I could do it in a real way and be authentic about it, show up and not try to look like somebody else. I think I had a vision of what transparency or vulnerability looked like on two sides of the spectrum. And I really struggled in my early days to figure out what that looked like. And I was really shut down. And so I think it starts honestly, like one of the biggest strategies I would say with communication is just being real. Like people don't care how much until they know how much you care. And I think that is a big piece of it for so many people. It's we try to say all the right things and they're not our words. And we try to do the thing that HR says. And I'm like, yes, follow your HR. Of course, make sure you're in legalities. But I think more than that is just be real with your people. People just want to work with real people. And I think in communication, online we have, how would you say, everyone's always asking chat GPT, like how would you say this in a professional way? I'd like to propose that authentic is professional. Nobody wants to work with a fake human. That's why we're kind of sick of like the call centers or like all of the recordings and talking to the bots. They just want to work with a real human. And so that I would say overall, like I could dig into like tons of strategies around communication, but I think overarching, that is the number one. Is I'm like, every time I have to have any conversation, okay, what is my voice in this? And what do I need out of this conversation so that I can be real with this person? And having really clear goals, I think, is really important when we're communicating, whether it's good, bad, indifferent, just knowing what you're trying to communicate and then backing into that. I think we try to be professional and we get lost in that and trying to sound like somebody else or doing it the right way versus just finding our way to do it.
Yeah, authenticity can be overused, especially in the last, I would say, couple years, because everybody seems to be talking about it. But I think that if we see it as honesty and transparency, as you're sharing it, is what I'm hearing that you're saying, it takes a whole nother level. Being authentic is showing up as the true you. And that means that you get to say, listen, I don't know the answer to that. Or, you know what, these are the goals that I'm seeing. What are you seeing? Asking, like you said, nobody cares how much until they know how much you care, which means asking questions, listening. It's not about always talking. A lot of the times, most of the time, we get to step back and just ask the questions and stay curious. And when we're in curiosity, that's when the relationship opens up and the communication can really unfold.
I heard this the other day that it's not just about being a good listener. The goal is actually to be the last to talk. Let everyone, and when you choose to be the last to talk in a boardroom, you actually give yourself the ability to listen at an even deeper level because you're not trying to figure out when people are done. You just have decided that you're going to listen to all the feedback and then collect yourself and share. And I think for people specifically in C-suite leadership or that are higher up in leadership, I think it's really important because people move when we speak and we just don't give that enough thought. We have to listen. I think listening is another one that comes real close to transparency. If you're not listening, then your people probably don't feel super valued.
Yeah, and I love that you brought that up because I heard something, and I'm guessing you have too. There's two ways of listening. There's listening to talk, and there's listening to actually listen, right? And
Mhm.
many of us, in many times, we're listening to talk. We're listening just to wait till they're done to have our voice heard, and that's not truly listening, and that's not really being curious and in true communication, which I think that's incredible. So let's talk about the hard conversations. What advice would you give? Because you shared a little earlier that having to let someone go or making those hard decisions was stressful for you. You're like, great, I'm going to all these conventions, I'm getting all these rah-rahs, but at the end of the day on Monday, I still got to go and handle my stuff. So, what advice would you give to someone who's in a leadership role and that's really stressful for them? Because again, we're building relationships. We come to care about the people that we're with. So, what would you say? What would be your biggest piece of advice for somebody in that on how to handle it and feel, I don't know if they can feel good about it at the end of the day.
Yeah, great question. I actually love the topic of difficult conversations because I was so terrible at them at the beginning. And I do a workshop on this all the time for teams. And I think the number one thing that's helped me is not just looking at the difficult conversation that's in front of you, but it's looking through it. What's on the other side of it? I think I see it as like this map, right? If we zoom out and we get to see the bigger picture of the map and where we're going with this person,
Mhm.
then it's easier to have that conversation because we're focused on the bigger picture versus just this log that might be like stopping you from actually proceeding on the trail. And so I think it's really important to understand where are we going. It's not just about because we can get so stuck, right? I remember the first person that I had to let go, and they're stealing from me and they're embezzling from the company. Like it was just this whole thing. And it was this little old lady. So I was just like, how she was
Oh,
one of my first hires. I'm like, how in the heck am I going to have this conversation? I'm firing my actual grandma. It's what it felt like. It was so awful. And here I am, not even 20 years old. I have to have this terrible conversation with this sweet old lady that wasn't actually as sweet as I had thought. I felt so distraught about it. And I couldn't see past how I was going to have that conversation. And if I would have just stopped and zoomed out, I could have had a conversation that was in pursuit of love for who she was and actually had that conversation to lead her well. Because I think most of the time we put our own comfort. This is another thing that I talk a lot about with difficult conversations is we have to be willing as leaders to put our comfort to the side and actually care more about our people's growth. And I think that when we do that specifically in difficult conversations, and then we zoom out and we look at the bigger picture, all of a sudden I could have come beside her and been like, hey, let's have a conversation about this. What's going on in your life? Can we just talk about this? And if I would have done that, because I found out later that her husband had been in the hospital and she was stealing food, it was like such a necessity. But if I could have just stepped back, I could have had an honest conversation and got her the help that she needed versus just being angry about her stealing from me. And honestly, she probably could have kept her job and we probably could have worked through it together. And I'm not advocating that most of the time you keep people who are stealing from you, but I think that there was a bigger conversation to get in her corner and just talk about this and maybe get her further help. But I was so stuck at what I was going to have to say and how to say it and if I was going to do the right thing and if I'd have to pay out all the things. And it just, I was so overwhelmed. And you make up these stories. You're like, I'm going to say this, and then they're going to say that. And this chatter I call head trash starts seeping in. And instead of focusing on the outcome, we're so focused on that conversation. And it just doesn't go as well as it could if we just zoom out. So there's a lot that I could spend like an hour on this because it's one of my favorite topics. And I've had some of our employees and team members be like, you're the queen of conflict. You just love conflict. I'm like, I don't love conflict. I love what comes after conflict because when we get to have the difficult conversation, we grow together. And like that tension and resistance is just like the muscle that helps you grow, right? It's great to be on the other side of it. I don't love conflict, but I think it's important for us to know how to do it well.
yeah, this is so good. And I'm learning a lot just by talking with you and listening to you about this and your expertise on it. And yeah, I don't like conflict. I shy away from conflict. I'm not a conflict lover, but I love how you're reframing this whole like picture, this whole scenario on it doesn't need to be conflictive. and we don't need to be reactionary. Again, going back to the asking questions, really getting curious.
Mhm.
Like, why is this person doing this? Like, let's go deeper. Just in like in sales, everything is similar. If we really dive into it, when it comes to sales, objections, for example, when we get an objection, typically it's not the real reason, right? It's not the real objection. We get
Mhm.
to go deeper. And if we ask questions, when we ask questions, we're going to get to the deeper root of what that objection is stemming from. Same thing with what's going on when you have to need to have those difficult conversations and there's conflict arising, like with this woman. What is going on in the background? We only get to see what's right in front of us. We don't get to see those layers that are underneath it. So I think that's how you explain it is beautiful. And I think we need to come back one day and do a full conversation just on confliction resolution.
I'm totally here for it. I love
I would
that.
love that. I think that would be so powerful for so many business owners because I think there's so many businesses that struggle with this and people in management who are like, oh my gosh, they dread this every day. And that's a stressful part of that job. And you know what? If we can release that stress by you showing up, you sharing what when you've learned and go, hey, it doesn't have to be that way. Let's open the door to have a conversation. It still may not end up with them still working with us. The solution may still be, and most likely will be, the termination of this particular relationship. But let's make it to where it feels good as it can be for both parties. Yeah.
Totally. Yeah. 100%. And it's it's so funny because so many times in our workshops, I think there's people who are you're like, I don't like it. I'm not good at it. I hear those comments. The number one person or like industry that attends that workshop over the last 3 years has been attorneys. And we've went in and done these conversations with entire law firms. And I'm like, out of everyone, I would have guessed that what it would be attending these, it wouldn't be attorneys. They're the bomb at having hard
They thrive
conversations.
on it, I thought.
Yeah, I'm like, what? But it's funny because they're really good in their profession, but with their teams, they really struggle because it is that pendulum. Either you come across really direct and people are afraid of you, or you come across too soft and people don't respect you. And so it's so funny because we did some research over the last couple of years of who's attending these, who are main clients for this. And it was a turn. I just couldn't believe it. So if you're that person that's, I can't have hard conversations, just think about that. Even attorneys struggle with that. So it's something that's a skill that has to be developed just like any other skill.
Yeah. So you help teams in building teams. So what are the key ingredients for building a high performing team and how can leaders who are building teams maintain that level of excellence?
Yeah, that's interesting. I'm like, that's such a good question. And I'll try to keep it to like a concise answer. I think honestly is like unity and having the right people. It's alignment. I've been married before, once before, and I've been married now 18 years to my current husband. And it's crazy to think that I tried to make my first marriage work now looking at my current marriage because there was such misalignment. And I think we forget that in business, there has to be just as much alignment in our business relationships, almost as if we're getting married to that person.
Yeah.
Specifically, if you're going to start a business with someone, it's just like getting married. And I think that's the number one thing is making sure that the people in your organizations actually do align with what you care about. And we start with understanding people's whys and understanding people's missions and visions. And I think we do that some for organizations, right? Like when you start a business, it's the expectation, I would say, across the boards. Most people go, I need a vision, mission, and values, right? That's become a thing specifically in America that's really popular. And never do we go, personally, I need a vision, mission, values. I need to understand what matters most to me. I need to understand what alignment even looks like and how I would describe it and who would be right and care about the same things that I care about. And it's not just like I said, like I don't hire anyone in our carpet cleaning company or at our construction company that walks in and goes, you know what? I've wanted to be a carpet cleaner since I was 5. I've had that business for 16 years. I have still to this day never found that person. So if you are that person, I want to talk. But we can actually help people build that bridge even if we're not in an industry where we feel like we get to save lives, because not everyone is going to work in those industries. There's only so much room in those industries. And so we have to build that bridge of how we still get to show up in our purpose and what matters most to us, even when we're doing work that maybe doesn't seem so sexy like that. So I think it's really important to have those connections in that.
Did your dog just bark? No, don't apologize. Open up your this is real. This is real stuff. We're here. I'm all about real and true and authentic, quote unquote, and
Right.
transparency. I have a dog. Like they walk back and forth. I'll be honest, my girl passed away two weeks ago and she was a
Oh,
barker. So I would always get nervous that she would bark. Because if you're watching us on YouTube, and then this is a sidebar, Christina, I'm sorry, but if you're watching us on YouTube, you're seeing me in my living room with my piano and everything. My office does not get good internet. So the last few months, I have not been recording from my office for both of my podcasts, especially my first one. We're just launching this one. This one's brand new. Nobody knows. If you're watching this one, you don't know that I used to be in my office, but the internet doesn't work well. So my dogs, I leave the back door open so they can come and go, but sometimes I forget. And she would bark. Like my other one that I have now, he's still with us. He just will scratch. He's not vocal, but the other one would bark. So no worries on your dog barking.
I'm like, oh my goodness. I'm like, he never barks. And so, of course, right now, I'm like, all day he's been
No.
sleeping. He's a little chunky French bulldog and he never peeps.
Oh,
So,
French
of
bulldogs
course.
are so cute. Yeah. Well, no, we're glad to have him here with us. So welcome to the show. No, and this is real. This is how are evolving. A lot of businesses are working from home, and this is the real deal when it comes to working. So we're not going to edit that out, and I'm glad to have him here with us. So, what's his name?
His name is Murphy, and he is the laziest French bulldog you've ever met. But yeah, if you go check me out on social media, you will see him because he is like our mascot.
Oh,
But it's interesting just even thinking about being real and the idea of so many people working from home. There's been so much controversy. I've watched this like battle on LinkedIn the last couple of weeks. We actually just talked about this, that even talking about alignment in, you can't actually say it's good or bad to have people return to the office, or it's bad to continue to have people at home. I've just watched a couple of these companies take jabs at each other on LinkedIn recently and just like in the media because they're returning to work, or like some companies are saying you do have to return to the office. And I think to the alignment piece, like not everyone needs to have the same opinion on that or can have the same opinion on that. And that's been a huge piece that we've tried to help companies figure out. Is it in alignment with your organization, your culture? Do your people work best at home or at the office? What is the right thing for your culture? And that has been something that I don't think most of us knew we were going to face,
yeah.
but has been such a sticking point for so many leaders and so many teams. Like we had a girl a couple weeks ago that quit because she just needed more connection. She's like, I love my company, but I can't work from home anymore.
Mhm.
And so now we're trying to help her find a new place. And it's really challenging for so many leaders to find the right fit, and then organizations to understand how to get people to work, and do you demand it? And there's so much there. And I think that is a huge part of what can set your culture apart when you do that from a state of your why and from a state of making an impact with intention. But there's not a one size fits all, right? Like it's
No.
real stuff. And we saw news anchors like in trying to manage kids and wives coming in. And it's just funny how that whole scenario has changed how we lead our teams in the last 5 years or so. It's fascinating. And the research there is ever changing. And I think it's really hard for companies to navigate. And those hard conversations really do come up around that too. Thanks for embracing my pup. And
Absolutely. Welcome Murphy to the show. Absolutely. You'll see my Cheeto walk through. You already have a couple of times. So Cheeto meet Murphy and vice versa. So yeah, that is a really key point because again, it comes back to communication. And if you want to be successful with your clients and selling whatever you're selling, because again, at the end of the day, we're a business, we're selling something because revenue drives the success and the continuation of the company to survive and exist. But it starts with the culture. And again, that goes back to communication. And like you said, the landscape of business and with employees and our internal teams has changed dramatically over the last 5 years since the
Mhm.
pandemic. And with the pandemic, there was no choice. Like it immediately, almost overnight, changed, where people that were solely in the office were now solely at home, and how to navigate that. And we saw the repercussions and a lot of things that we won't go into now with that. Some people couldn't handle it very well. Some people thrived on it. And now I think over the last 5 years, a lot of people have, like, we figured it out. And that being said, to your case in point of the woman who is, I need socialization, I can't be work from home. My why, to even why I started my business back in 2018, before the pandemic, was I wanted to be home with my kids. I was going through a divorce. I had been a stay-at-home mom, and were used to having me. That being said, as I share with you behind the scenes, I worked 2 jobs as I was building, but I had my why of wanting to be home. So I was outside, but I was always home when they were home. I wanted to get there full time. So I had the flexibility. If they called me for sick, I could call from school sick, I could go get them. So I think, to your point and what you were sharing, it's key. And I'm glad that we had this came up. This was beautiful and perfect. This is an important piece we weren't going to talk about. But again, communication with your team, knowing what their needs are, having those hard conversations. Whereas if you're a business and you can't fulfill that need, then have that hard conversation and that person gets to move on, because they're not going to be a integral piece of your growth, which is okay. And that opens the space for that person that is going to be an a major piece of your growth to come in, and in the way that works for both of you. So yeah, I'm glad that this whole thing worked out in that conversation, for sure.
Yeah. Oh, go ahead.
No,
Sorry.
go ahead.
I think it's interesting to think about our teams and thinking about them being our best yes and them being and us being their best yes. I think a lot of times I think about like your best yes. And if anyone's read that book, it's a great book. But it's interesting to think about when we say yes to the wrong thing, we're saying no to the right thing. And I look at our teams that way. I'm like, if this person is not thriving and isn't truly aligned, and I'm just hanging on to this person and continuing to give them a paycheck, and they want to work from home and I can't give them that, or vice versa, or whatever the sticking point or the hot button is, and performance is down and they're just not thriving in my company, and I'm continuing to say yes to this person, or vice versa, they're just showing up for the paycheck or whatever it is because it's comfortable, we're actually holding them back from doing the work that they probably were created to do. And I think that's such a disservice to our organizations and to their lives. I've had, and it's funny. I feel like people with how I'm talking, people might be like, wow, she probably fires a lot of people. I actually have fired one person in the last 6 years. And it's because we just have a culture of alignment and we have hard conversations often. And we talk about these challenging things when things are or aren't working. And we track things very intentionally, but not just from a bottom line perspective of, hey, are you actually thriving here? Is this actually a really good use of your time? Do you feel empowered? Do you feel engaged? Because the quiet quitting thing is taking over our companies and taking over our organizations. And let's be honest, if somebody's quiet quitting, they're not doing their best work. And that's a disservice to their life. I had a terminal condition a couple of years ago. Obviously, I made it out totally fine and I'm totally healed. But it really did wake me up to go, I'm not wasting my life in a business or a position that I don't like, because we get one life. And if we're wasting those years just getting a paycheck, money is important. I am a fan of money. I have to live. I get it. But there's a lot of things we can do to make money. And if you're not engaged, there's just a better yes. Go explore, get curious, and make sure your team is engaged and you're engaged just as much. Because I've sold businesses because I found myself there.
Yeah. I want to ask, I know we're running out of time and I want to be respectful of your time. And I have 2 questions left, but I'm going to go to one because this is a new podcast. So we've interviewed some people, but collaborations, in my opinion, is currency. It's a major piece, connection, collaboration. And so I'd like to talk about partnerships, strategic collaborations and things. And I know that that's one of your key talking points. So what are the key factors that leaders should consider when forming strategic partnerships? And how can they ensure that collaborations that they're forming are leading to mutual growth and long-term success?
Great question. Yeah, I've started businesses where I literally have zero marketing funds. And so until you have a marketing budget, strategic partnerships, and even when you do, I think that is such a vital part of our businesses. I think it's being clear on your ask and it's showing up and having a clear understanding of what you're asking out of that relationship. I've had people on boards and that I've asked, and they've been like, I can't do that, but I can do this. And so I think it's being willing to be clear and have a very clear ask because nobody likes someone to just hang out with them or try to build a relationship because they want something and they weren't clear. That's manipulation. And nobody wants to be a manipulator.
Right.
No one wakes up and that's their dream. I've yet to find someone that says that also. So I think that it's just being clear on your ask and understanding like, hey, like I have this opportunity, you have this other opportunity. Let's bring those opportunities together so we can be better together and just being honest about that. And then doing it with people you like. Like that is the biggest disservice you can do for your business or anyone else is trying to build a partnership with someone you don't respect. And I years ago I ran networking groups for a couple organizations, and you just watch people put other people in these groups that they don't like. Why would you put someone in a referral group that you don't trust or know, like, trust? That's where it all starts, right? Any networking, any strategic partnership, we have to know and trust them. And if you don't, then don't build a partnership. There's probably 100 other people in that industry or who has a similar service or product that could service your clients in a really great way. Go find someone and be honest with what that is. And then I think the last thing is sell through people, don't sell to them. Like just show up and know your value and show your value and be ready to serve. I think we've forgotten how to serve. Also, I think a lot of times, specifically with this younger generation and beyond, and I don't mean just like the Z or millennial, but I think across the boards, we just have forgotten that people aren't going to just trust us. That's something that has to be built. And so sometimes you have to show up and do the work before you get paid to build that trust, specifically in strategic partnerships. And so I think there is that piece also.
Yeah, absolutely. Serve first and everything else will follow through. And when in ask again, it comes back to communication, asking, how can I serve you? How can I support you? And I always tell people, I'm like, if you're stuck on what your next step is, right? Because many times we can get stuck on our own stuff. We don't know what the next action step is. We don't, and action brings clarity. So we need to take action. You're going to find out quick
Mm-hmm.
sooner than later if it's the right step or the wrong step. And that's only going to lead you to the next step. And then, but once you take that action, you're going to get clarity on where you're going next. I tell everybody action brings clarity, and that's going to get you to the next step. Being truthful on what you're looking for. And also, when you're stuck, focus out. How can you help that next person? How can
Mm-hmm.
ask, like, figure out if you don't know what to do next, focus on someone else and how you can help them. And as you were saying, most likely that's going to come back to reciprocate on you. But we're not giving to get, we're giving to give. If you truly do it as a give, then at the end of the day, whether it comes from them or not, it's going to come back to you. And it may not be
Mm-hmm.
specifically from that person. It may be come from 5 people that they know down the road that when somebody needs something or is looking for a service or a product, that person that you helped is going to go, oh, you know what? I know exactly who the right person is for you.
Totally. I think reciprocity is something that we need to talk more about in our society. I think that the art of having a reciprocal mindset
Mhm.
and not having to get something, but still owning your value. I think that's a really fine line, right? I see a lot of business owners or a lot of people like that are starting businesses come in and they just give, and it's not actually serving because they're not actually building that relationship or they're not building with intention. And so I think it's own your value, don't
Mhm.
discount yourself, but serve with intention also, and go collect the data and like use certain circumstances and invest in certain circumstances regardless of where you're at in your journey. Even if you're new, even if you've been in business for 100 years, you should still be serving at some level and investing in the next generation, investing in people or communities. I think that's a huge piece, but I love what you're saying, like not to gain. Don't do it with that expectation. Do it because you believe in actually investing in other people.
Absolutely true. Exact great points that you just shared there. You want to be intentional about it and make sure that you're not undervaluing yourself and you're not just giving away everything and you're because that's going to it's going to run you ragged and you're going to burn out. That's just
Yeah.
going to happen. So Christine, share with us how we can find you. So for our listeners and they're like, oh my gosh, I got to connect with her. How do they find you, Christine? And can they connect with you?
Yeah, I am most active on LinkedIn. And so you can definitely find me, Christine Hernandez, with Impact Initiative on LinkedIn. Our website is impactinitiative.network. And then I'm, of course, on Instagram and TikTok because I have a great media team that gets me out there. And so it's Bold Leader Co. is my handle on Instagram and Bold Leader on TikTok as well.
Awesome. So thank you, Christine, for that. So make sure that you connect with her. Go to impactinitiative.network. You can also find her on all the social media platforms. We're going to have all her links in the show notes. So if you are unable to check her out right now because you are either in the car doing what you're doing, then don't worry, just come back and check the show notes. We will have all of her contact and amazingness there for you, including her bio and more information and details about Christine. Christine, is there anything before we wrap that I didn't get to touch on? Because I know I had so many more questions, but we got deep into some things, which I'm so grateful for this conversation. I think it was super insightful, filled with a ton of gold nuggets and takeaways. But is there something that you wanted to share that I didn't get to ask you about?
I guess the only other thing is if you're looking to learn more about the Enneagram, I do have a newsletter on my LinkedIn page and on our website. I write a blog about the Enneagram. So if you're a leader that's looking for more information about that through communication, I'd love to help out there. And I share lots of information of how to utilize that. But thank you, Heidi. This has been so much fun. And I'm super excited for your new podcast and just to see all the new things that you're doing.
Thank you, Christine. It has been incredible. I've really enjoyed our conversation. We've had some fun. So thank you, Christine, for being here. Thank you, Murphy, for joining us. And thank you for listening to us on the Business Growth Spotlight podcast. If you feel your business is blending in and you're ready to grow your visibility, be seen as the expert in your space, and scale to the next level, then go grab our free blueprint. It's called Spotlight to Scale Blueprint, and you can go grab that at spotlighttoscale.com/blueprint. Also, one more time, make sure that you connect with Christine and go to impactinitiative.network. Check her out on all the social media platforms. As she said, she's very active on them, especially LinkedIn. So go check her out, go connect with her, go message her and let her know that you heard about her here with me today. Thanks again, Christine. This has been such a pleasure. And thank you for listening. And we will see you on the next episode of the Business Growth Spotlight.